Greetings, this is Jim Lindsay. This is the tutorial for the middle section of Chapter 6 for our Visio textbook, the step-by-step using Microsoft Visio 2013. Again, this is the middle section of that Chapter 6. This one won't take as long as Part 1 did or the first part did, but I thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and break this into chunks because it is, pretty substantial bits of information. So we'll cover it in chunks as opposed to one huge big monolithic piece of information. We're going to start working on page 259 in your textbook, and we're going to work back for about to page 275. So from 259 to page 275, that's what we're covering. We're going to be learning about how to link a Visio drawing to a data source, and then how to make the drawing pull information from that data source manually and also in an automated fashion. So we're going to do those things over the next several minutes together. So what do you need for this? Well, you need a couple of different drawings. We have the files that you get for you can download for Chapter 6, and we're going to start with the HR process map D, and we're going to first do this manually. And as you look at this drawing, this will be very familiar to you. We've been working with it for all of this lesson, and you'll see all these different shape data fields populated. You've been working on all of this. Well, what we want to do is, instead of having to type each one of these in one by one in the drawing, we want to reach out to a data source, which could be an Excel file or an Exchange database or some other type of database, or a Microsoft Access database, and then have that data come in from there. And then we could just maintain the data over at the data source, and then let Visio pull it as it needs it, right? So it would be more efficient. How do you do that? Well, let's take a quick look over at the data source, because the data source looks like this. It's this Microsoft Excel file called HR process data. When you open this up, these fields, these column headings should look familiar: cost, process number, owner, and so on. These should look familiar because those are the field names over in the drawing. And we want to link, and you'll see that there's a row. You have rows 101 through 108. These correlate to the shapes in our drawing, and we have data in here. So we want to pull this data into our drawing. How do you do that? Well, you can leave this open if you like, but just minimize it, get it out of your way, because we'll go back to that and change some stuff, and then we'll force the drawing to refresh itself, and you'll see through that refreshing process that it's actually tied together. So let's go back to the drawing, and let's initiate this process to link it to a data source. All right, we're going to do this through the data tab. There's a tab on the ribbon in Visio for linking the data sources and then getting data. So let's start with that. And the first thing I want you to do is, under this display data area on the data tab of the ribbon, just click on that little drop down, and at the very bottom there's a choice that says apply after linking data to shapes. And right now it's checked, and usually you would want that checked, but for this exercise let's uncheck it. So just select it. If you go back and look at it, there should not be a check there. And again, how I did that, from the data tab, you've got this data graphics drop down. If you see a check mark next to that, click on that so that is unchecked. Why is that helpful? Well, if you leave it checked, and normally you would leave it checked, when you start to link the data, you're going to start to see bits of data pop out here to the side, and it's just going to congest our view and make it a little bit harder to view what's on the screen. It's not detrimental. It's not going to damage the process in any way, but just for clarity, for this example, it'll be easier to not have that checked right now. So let's get into our linking. You'll see as you look at this tab, there is a section of this tab of the ribbon called external data, and you can link data to shapes. And so that's what we want to do. These are our shapes, and we want to link data to these shapes. So we click on that button, and it says, OK, user, where is your data? What is the data source? And in our case, it's an Excel workbook, so we're going to go with this first one. But you can take a look at these other choices. I've already mentioned these in the preceding lessons, things that you can link to. But we're going to have an Excel file that we link to. So we're going to leave that top choice selected and hit next. And then it's going to say, okay, where is this file that you want to have as your data source? So I need to identify that. I'm going to hit the Browse button. And in my case, it's on my desktop in this Visio student files for Chapter 6. In your case, and then I'll select the file and hit Open. In your case, just navigate to wherever you've saved this Excel file. It could be on your desktop, it could be in your documents, it could be in your CIS 320 folder. Wherever you put it, that's what you select. And once you've chosen the location for your Excel file, hit Next. And then you have to tell it which worksheet in the data source is the one with your data. And as you look at and think back to your CIS 141 and CIS 320, C243 days, an Excel file, an Excel workbook can contain multiple worksheets. In this case, all of our stuff is on sheet 1. And so it's fine right now with sheet 1 selected. But if you had a particular tab of the spreadsheet which contains your data, you could select it from here. And then also this box is checked for first row of data contains column headings. That's going to be helpful for us because, as we look at the column headings here, cost, process, number, and so on, these are the field names that we want to be able to link into our drawing, right? So all of this as it is fine. Hit Next. And we want to select, we're going to leave this as it is. Basically, we want to link all the columns and all the rows. If there were specific columns and specific rows in your data source that you wanted to use, this is where you would interact with the software to select those, but we want all of them. So I hit Next. And then on this one, what you're telling Visio is, in my data source there is some particular field which is unique. Essentially what we're doing is we're creating the primary key. So if you've ever worked with Microsoft Access or any sort of database management system, you'll recognize that term, a primary key. And what a primary key is, it's some sort of characteristic which makes each entry unique. For a human being in the United States, your social security number would be a good primary key because no two individuals are supposed to have the same social security number. Or at WKU, no two students are supposed to have the same 800 number. So that's what we're identifying. In our data source, if you look at the data source, these process numbers are unique. And so we're going to accept this recommended choice here from Visio to use our process number as our primary key. Now if you didn't have any primary keys, you could choose this one right down here, and in that case you would want to make sure that each of your shapes was presented or linked in the exact same order in which they were listed in your spreadsheet. That would be pretty complicated. So having a unique identifier in there like the process number is convenient. So I'm going to hit Next, and it says, okay, you have successfully imported your data. And hit OK, hit Finish. And it shows me, let me get this a little bit shorter here if I can make this page a little bit smaller. These are those different rows that were in the spreadsheet. Let me get this guy to where he, yeah, perfect. Okay, and so now what I need to do, so I've now linked my drawing to the data source. I've completed the first half of this. Next, what I need to do is I need to take the individual rows of data and actually tell Visio which shapes that the pieces of information apply to. So in this case, this process number 101 is the information for logging the hiring request. I'm just going to left click and hold. I'm going to drag up here, and when I get on top of that, you see how it turns from its regular shape to it has the blue little square around it. I'm going to drop it, and when I do that, you'll see a chain appear here. And what that tells me is that that row has now been linked to a shape in my drawing. I have to do the same thing for these other rows here, 102 through 108, and those are going to go to these different shapes in my drawing. So I'll put these out here, and there it goes. And now if I look at those different shapes, you'll see that the information that was in the spreadsheet is now in the drawing. Let me prove that to you. Let me come down here to this next, the second row here. Like you'll see, make a job offer, there's nothing there yet. But if I drag and drop this 105 to that shape and drop it, that information appears. And so I have to do the same thing for 106, 107, and 108. And in the process, what Visio is doing, you know, I messed up there. I should have been at select a candidate, and I apologize on that. I could undo that. Undo, 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 and select a candidate is supposed to be 105. So I hit Control Z to undo those. So you can undo something if you mess up. So maybe that's a good thing to show. And there we go. And that is how you then link your data. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this pane. Again, this is a task pane or a visible pane. So I'm going to hit the little X so there's more of the screen available here. And let me show you next how to get how to refresh information. So let's say this is my data source, right? And all of this data is now being reflected in the drawing. And these two are tied together. As I make changes here, they should show up in a drawing if I tell the drawing to go and basically make sure it's up to date. So I'm going to change the information here. I'm going to make this John Cena as the owner for that one, and then make this one The Rock here. And I'll pause it while I put some names. Okay, let me make sure I'm recording. Yep. And so I have updated my data here in the spreadsheet. Let me go back to the drawing, and let's get that task pane back visible again. Go to my view, go to my task panes. Actually, I need to be in the data tab, and for my show hide my external data window. So there you go. What I can do is in this external data window, because I want it to update, I just have to right click it, and I don't even have to do that. I can just click on refresh. You see this button right here? I can click on this button, the top part of it, refresh all, and it's going to go out there and it's going to refresh all that data. It did it. Hit close, and as I now go around my drawing, you'll see that the entries have been updated in the drawing. You can also, let me right click in this external data area. I'm going to go to configure refresh, and with it what I can do, as you look at these settings here, there's a button right here or a box you can check, and you can tell it to, on a set schedule, go out and refresh the data. So I'm going to set for every 1 minute, go out there and refresh the data, and I'll just leave that open. Let me go to my spreadsheet here. I'm going to change these, and then I'll meet you back here in just a minute. Okay, so you can see I've changed the owners here, and hopefully I've gotten that done before it does its update. Jump over to here, and we'll just leave this to you'll see it's at like 318. I'll pause it, and when it updates, I'll open it back up. And there it went ahead and updated. It's still at 318. Awesome. So that's how through that automatic refreshing, you can again right click in the external data area. If you right click, go to that configure the refresh, you can set it to go out and reach out to that data source on a regular basis and get the information. Now, let me hit OK. What we just did is pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and close this external data window, get it out of the way. But that's not the most efficient way to set up this process, because we had to first link to the data source, then we had to take each of those records within the data source and connect those to shapes within our drawing. It would be even better when we just link it'd be better if we could just link the drawing to the data source and have it automatically, bam, take everything and put it together. And we can do that. That's what I'm going to show you now. So I'm going to save this guy and close it. And again, this was the HR process map D, right? I'm going to close that, save it, and close it. And I'm going to go back to the HR process map A. And you'll remember this one is the very first one that we worked with. And so on this one, as you go through and look at this, we didn't do make a lot of changes to this. We mainly just kind of looked at what was there, right? So what I want you to do here is go back to HR process map A and just open each of its, each of these shapes, and just make sure that the process number is there. And logging the hiring request is process number 101. This one should be 102. And all you have to do is just put in the process numbers, because what you want is a coordinated number between the drawing shape and then the data source. This one's 104. This guy down here, select a candidate, should be 105. Make a job offer should be 106. Candidate accepting is 107. And lastly, our hire a candidate should be 108. Let me save that. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back through that, go to data. You'll recognize this tab, we just worked with this. I'm going to again link this to a data source. And I'm going to go through the same process we went through a minute ago, our same Excel file. And I'll have to choose that Excel data file. And then it's, our information is still in sheet 1, and the first row still contains the column headings. I still want all the rows and all the columns. And I still want to use the process numbers as my primary key. And I've successfully linked the data source, the spreadsheet, to the drawing now. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on automatically link, and I want to link all the shapes on the page, and I have to tell it which fields, which of my fields from my drawing match up to the fields in the data source, and that's going to be our process number. So the process number in the data source equals the process number in the drawing. And I'll hit next and finish. At that point, as I look at my shapes, you'll see all the data is there. So instead of me having to drag and drop each one of those rows to those individual shapes, by having that process number already populated in the drawing, it was able to do that automatic linking for me. And now you're seeing some shape data start to appear to the right of these shapes. That's why, and on this one you'll note that with the data graphics, I had that check mark made. I had a check mark still checked, and that's why it showed that stuff up. That's what I was talking about, how it gets a little congested. But if you wanted that to go away, you can select a shape. Select these. I'll just select the top rows worth, and under the data graphics, just make it to where it just shows the shape versus some of the shape data along with the shape. So that's how you can get rid of that if you want to get rid of it. But that's the process, and so that's the middle section of this chapter. We basically took the drawing and we linked it to a data source, and then once we linked it to a data source, because there was a connection or already a field populated, we were able to automatically link it in that second example. So pretty cool stuff. Thanks for your attention. In our last little bit of this, we'll get into the reporting feature where we can start to make queries. Basically, we're going to use Visio to create an SQL query of the data that's stored in the database, and it's pretty exciting. I'll see you at the next lesson.